to be treated as equals. I personally have no interest in fighting with the United States.
Rafael Correa is now being cast as one of the bad left.
With all due respect, knowing the North American media, I would be more worried if they spoke well of me.
Today, the Argentinian president, with concerns about U.S. trade policy, seemed in no hurry to embrace his American counterpart.
Nestor Kirchner, former president of Argentina. Bush told me the best way to revitalize the economy is war, and that the United States has grown stronger with war. Those were his exact words.
This summer, take an incredible look at an extraordinary movement.
Lula da Silva, for the first time, the poor are treated like human beings. Chavez, and perhaps this is one of the things that keeps us going, the optimism, faith, and hope, and the concrete evidence that we can change the course of history. It's possible, Oliver.
South of the border.
I'm just curious, how many sets of shoes do you have?
Christina Kirchner, they always ask questions like this to women. I don't get it. They never ask a man how many pairs of shoes he has.
And that was the trailer for Oliver Stone's South of the Border. It's being released this week in New York. South of the Border. The leftist transformation in the region might be ignored or misrepresented as nothing but anti-Americanism in the mainstream media, but the film seeks to tell a different story. Released in Latin America earlier this month, opening here in the United States this week. Award-winning director Oliver Stone joins us here in New York, and we're joined by the acclaimed writer and activist Tariq Ali. He co-wrote the screenplay for South of the Border with Mark Weisbrot. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Oliver Stone, welcome for the first time to Democracy Now! It's good to have you here. Talk about why you chose to make this film.
It chose me. I do feature films most of the time, but I've done 6 documentaries and work. This is my 4th one, and it gets right to the point. You know, you don't, with a film you take a year. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of actors, costumes, script. This is a much simpler way of going about it, and it keeps you humble. It keeps you in the field. I've been going down to South America off and on for 20 years. I did Salvador there in 1985 with about the Central America situation. I was shocked what I saw. I'd been back from Vietnam for about for 15 years at that point, and I saw all these American soldiers down in Honduras and you know, fighting against the Nicaraguan government. I saw them in Salvador, and I saw them in a form of them in Costa Rica. I was shocked, and from that thing I went back and saw Chiapas. I saw Commander Marcos. I rode with him a bit in the jungle. And then I went down there to Cuba. I had problems with Cuba because my films were censored here. They were not shown. One of them was not shown, Comandante. It was taken off the air. It was shown in Europe. And then, Chavez, it was not shown on HBO. It was pulled from HBO. It was promoted, and then it was taken off the air 2 weeks before.
Why?
Because that was after that sort of that mindset of post 9/11. You know, there was a lot of hysteria in the air, and Castro had just arrested hijackers. There'd been a confrontation with Bush, so HBO kindly told me, you know, we'd like you to complete the film and go back and ask him some other questions. I said, no, this is my film. This is the way it's finished. I'll go back and I do another film called Looking for Fidel, which we ended up doing. So I asked him a lot of hard questions on Looking for Fidel, which was aired. But they never aired the beauty. It's a heartbreaking story for me personally as a filmmaker, because I really put a lot of effort into it. It's a 90-minute film. It's played all over the world except here. So Chavez was sort of a natural because he was such a demonized, polarizing figure. But when I met him, it was not at all what I thought, you know, what we made him out to be. So I went on from talking to Hugo. He suggested, you know, go talk to other people in the region. You know, don't believe me necessarily. So we went around and we talked to 7 other presidents in 6 countries, and we got this amazing unity in referendum saying, like, hey, these guys are changing the way Latin America is, and we don't know this story in America when you think about it, except Peru and Mexico. Well, Peru and Colombia really are the 2 American allies in the region. So what struck me as as something that's historic is that I've never seen these countries in South America, in a sense, unified by an idea of reform at the same time. Because in the past, when Chile or Argentina or Brazil happened, we picked off the reformers one at a time because they didn't happen in a unity. And this is the first time I've seen that since Bolivar, maybe. We haven't, you know, going back to 1820s.
Well, what struck me also was, I think, the way you were able not only to present their viewpoints in terms of how they saw the changes in Latin America, but also humanizing them, because for an American audience, the image of Hugo Chavez, of this firebrand, and then you have him on a bicycle riding around in the yard of his former home, breaking the bicycle. And then, I thought the most comic line in the whole film was when, after breaking the bicycle, he says in Spanish, whose bicycle is this? I guess I'm going to have to pay for it.
Listen, he's not rich. His father's not rich, and he was also a military man, and he comes from a poor family, and he is what he is. He works for the people. I've never seen a man work so hard. I mean, he really cares. So do all of them, by the way. Every single one of them I met was elected duly, democratically, which Americans don't know, and they serve the people, unlike a lot of the oligarchs and dictators who ruled prior, and we support it. But we're against these people. That's what amazes me. What is it about America that needs enemies and makes enemies out of these people who are reformers in their country, whether it's Allende or the people in Argentina or Brazil or Torrijos in Panama, or the list is long. Why? Nicaragua.
Exactly. You also center in on the IMF and the role of the IMF, which, again, most Americans know little about the operations of the IMF around the world. Yet in most other countries in the world, the IMF is well known.
Mark Weisbrot was with the Center of Economic Policy and Research, and he's a co-founder of that, and he brought that element into this. It's very important, and obviously Americans don't care about economics as much. It's hard to follow. But Mark points out that in the 1990s, there was about $20 billion in loans from the IMF to Latin America. Now there's about $1 billion. Which is interesting. They got rid of it. And Nestor Kirchner of Argentina is a real hero here. He did technically default on the IMF, but then he paid them off. And he defaulted on the corporate bonds, which is a big scandal. But yet Argentina economy, which was predicted to be a disaster, improved radically. So did Chavez's economy for 6 years. It went crazy. I think the gross national product went 90% up. 90%, poverty was cut in half. So all these changes in all these countries have been positive since the IMF is out. They don't want our money, they don't want the loans. It's important.
We're going to go right now to a clip of Hugo Chavez talking about oil.
Chavez's reforms provoked fierce resistance from the country's oligarchy.
We have a government that lies. They're all a bunch of liars.
They controlled the Venezuelan media and used it to foment opposition. They also mobilized support within the military and received help from the United States and Spain.
I think the most reasonable thing for the president and his cabinet to do is resign voluntarily or disappear from the country.
A businessman, Pedro Carmona, was chosen to be the new president. He supposedly flew to Madrid to be measured for a presidential sash.
The coup against Chavez had one motive: oil. Bush made a plan. First, Chavez, oil. Second, Saddam, Iraq. The reason behind the coup in Venezuela and the invasion of Iraq is the same. Oil.
That was Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. Oliver Stone, talk about how the U.S. media portrays Chavez.
Well, all you have to do is go to YouTube and you'll see. I mean, we put it in the movie. It's just, it's hysterical and outrageous. And by the way, mainstream Washington Post, New York Times, it's awful. I mean, it's almost as if the New York Times guy, Simon Romero is his name, he sits there for years and is a sniper. He doesn't say one positive thing. It's like every week or two he has to file his story, make it negative. It seems like that's a directive, and he goes out, I mean, you read this stuff. It's all of it, and he never goes to the other side. He never gets the other side of the story, and he does very complex little incidents, and he builds it up into this madhouse of, it seems like it's Chile again, like Allende. It's like the economy is crashing, and the contrary is true. I mean, it's a very rich country. It's a regional power. It's got apparently $5,000 billion barrels of oil in reserve. It's a major player for the rest of our time on Earth, as long as we go with oil. You know, they're not going to go away. So Brazil and Venezuela, and that raises a whole interesting thing about what recently happened in Iran. You know, when Lula from Brazil went over there with Turkey, Erdogan, That was a very interesting moment for me and for Tariq, because I grew up in the 50s, so did he, and we remember the neutral bloc. We remember Nehru and Nasser and Sukarno and a fellow in Cambodia. Sihanouk. I mean, there was a block of people who used to say, hey, this is what we want. This is not what the United States wants. And they were a mediator, a third rail between the Soviets and us. That's gone in the world, and people don't seem to realize it who are growing up. So when Lula did that, I couldn't believe the outrage by people like Tom Friedman attacking him. And it was disgusting, I thought, really disgusting, because he never presented the point of view of Brazil and Turkey, which are major countries, huge powers, regional powers.
And the New York Times, of course, before that trip, was blasting the possibility of Lula being able to negotiate any kind of arrangement, and basically saying he was naive, he was out of his league. And Tariq, your response to the impact of that deal that was brokered by Turkey and...
Well, I mean, everyone was surprised in the West that how dare these countries have the nerve to go over our heads and negotiate an independent deal with Iran. But this is what the world once used to be like. No one accepted U.S. hegemony unquestioningly, as many of these Security Council members do. The other point is that Brazil was very courageous to do this, Lula particularly, because Brazil has been trying to get a permanent Security Council seat for a long time, and they've now jeopardized that process. They will never be allowed it. So they did it for a good principled reason, showing the world Iran is prepared to do a deal. It's you who don't want to do it because you're permanently under pressure from Israel.
We are talking to Oliver Stone, who's done this new film that's coming out this week in the United States called South of the Border. Tariq Ali co-wrote South of the Border. And we want to turn to the Brazilian president, Lula da Silva, talking about Brazil.
I learned as a trade unionist that one only respects someone who respects themselves. I personally have no interest in fighting with the United States. The only thing I want is to be treated as equals. When I met with the head of the IMF and paid off the debt in full, he did not want me to pay the debt. He said, don't worry about the money. We can roll it over. Keep the money. We paid off the IMF. We paid off the Paris Club. We do not owe anything to anybody. And now we have $260 billion surplus. I'm truly optimistic.
I mean, Chavez and all the crap.
That was Lula da Silva, the Brazilian president. Oliver Stone uses the clips to talk to us. Now we're going to say that right on the air. What you're saying about Lula da Silva, about Chavez, and how they're covered and how they're censored in various ways.
You go.
Well,
Tariq Ali.
Why does this happen? That's the question we have to ask. Why are these people so hated by the mainstream media in the United States? And the answer is simple, that they present an alternative. What they're doing is using their wealth, especially the oil wealth of Venezuela, to bail out the poor. Here, it's the rich who are bailed out by taxpayers' money. In South America, it's the poor who are bailed out by the wealth which they regard as owned commonly by the people. And they were the first countries to attack neoliberal economics, which collapsed in Wall Street in 2008. The whole Wall Street system collapsed. These guys had been doing it for 10, 15 years previously. So none of them was surprised by the Wall Street crash because of what they'd been doing. So we should look at them as pioneers. Hey, guys, you were the ones who taught us that this could happen in Argentina, in Venezuela, and later Brazil, Ecuador.
And Oliver Stone, we're going to play a clip when you were interviewing Nestor Kirchner, and you see him as a real hero in this, even within the pantheon of these leaders, because he actually stood up directly to George Bush at a summit, an important summit a few years back in Argentina, over this issue of neoliberalism.
Yeah, not only him, but he's also now the president of UNASUR, which is the union of these countries. This is a new deal, and it's not just him, but he was the first one to say no to the Western neoliberal economics, and he actually they were predicting a disaster. There'd been like 4 or 5 Argentine presidents right before him, one after the other, and he lasted. And he brought the country out of this horrifying cycle, and it prospered enormously up until recently, where the world recession has put back some of these countries, no question.
Let's take a look at that clip of Kirchner.
Were there any eye-to-eye moments with President Bush that day, that night?
I say it's not necessary to kneel before power. Nor do you need to be rude to say the things you have to say to those who oppose our actions. We had a discussion in Monterrey. I said that the solution for the problems right now, I told Bush, is a Marshall Plan. And he got angry. He said the Marshall Plan is a crazy idea of the Democrats. He said the best way to revitalize the economy is war. And that the United States has grown stronger because of war.
War. He said that.
He said that. Those are his exact words.
Or is he suggesting that South America go to war?
Well, he was talking about the United States. The Democrats have been wrong. All of the economic growth of the United States has been encouraged by the various wars. He said it very clearly. President Bush is...
President Bush is...
Well, he's only got 6 days, right?
Yes.
Thank God.
That was former President Kirchner. And these comments of President Bush, as he says about the United States growing strong through war, I don't think that's ever been reported anywhere.
Well, it goes to the heart of the issue, and I don't, we know it, but we sound jaded when we say it. But why does America go to war? I went to Vietnam. We went right after that. I made 3 movies about it, and then we went back to Panama. We invaded Panama, Grenada. Then we went into Iraq twice, and now Afghanistan. I don't get it, and there has to be a reason for all this corporate march to war. And the press supports it, and we saw it in Iraq most vividly. It was very depressing to be a Vietnam veteran at that time, and now we're seeing it again, and with Iran and with Afghanistan, this support of this war. There's no sense to it, because we don't resemble the Afghani or the Vietnam average person. Our soldiers have to go. If they're going to go there, they got to stay. That's all there is to it. They got to become citizens of Afghanistan. That's the only way they're ever going to make it. They're not. There's no way we're going to stay, and they know it. And as long as they know we're leaving, I don't see any victory, any exit strategy at all.
Let's go, since you talked about your time in Vietnam, to one of your most well-known films, a clip of Platoon.
What about the f***ing rice and the weapons? Who they for?
5 mics from the blue and approaching.
An LVC! Knows what I'm saying. He understands. Don't you, Pop?
Goddamn right he does.
You Vic.
I mean, he's lying through his teeth. Come on!
Waste the then see you talk.
Where's the doesn't know anything?
I'm không phải
là Việt Cộng. Ở đây không có là Việt Cộng, không biết không?
He swears he doesn't know anything. He hates the NBA, but they come when they want and they just take the place.
What's the saying?
I don't know. She's going on about why are we killing the pigs? They're farmers. They got to make a living. All that kind of shit.
Không phải là Việt Cộng. Ở đây không có là Việt Cộng, không biết không? Tại sao vậy hả? Sao cái ông gà của tôi? Ông nín đây tôi nói.
Đừng có nói.
Hả? Ông mi băm chết. Có mà. Có con mà. Ông đến đây giết heo, giết gà, phải không? Ông mi băm chết.
Trời ơi, bác chết rồi. Chết rồi, trời ơi. Tell him. He starts talking, or I'm going to waste more of them. Tell him, Leonard.
Người đi vùng không thông chi khai cái đảo.
Tôi không đi.
Người đi.
Tôi không đi. Tôi đi.
A scene from Platoon.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, we've trashed Vietnam. I mean, completely. We didn't even recognize it for so many years after the war. We did the same thing to Iraq. I wouldn't want to live in Iraq. I mean, they call it democracy. That's not democracy. It's the same thing over and over. Why? Why does, I see all the, I don't watch TV as much as a lot of people, but what I see is people all get on the air, they talk about our discretionary spending. They talk about the Tea Party people. They talk about education, cutting this. I don't get it. Why, if the majority of our discretionary spending is Pentagon, it's like $1 trillion with the shadow budget in there, $1 trillion a year. That's most of the discretionary spending of this country. Why is it going to war?
You've been listening to Oliver Stone, the Academy Award-winning filmmaker Oliver Stone, who did a film that didn't get as much attention as Wall Street, to say the least, didn't get as much attention as Platoon, to say the least, or Born on the 4th of July. But it is extremely significant. It's called South of the Border, and it was made by Oliver Stone, the Academy Award-winning